Arc 6, The Corridor of Memories. Chapter 75, Louis Arneb. That had been the philosophy Louis Arneb acquired, upon the extremity of eating and hunting down the lives of innumerable humans, as the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony. Louis Arneb was the youngest sister among the three siblings who were Sin Archbishops affixed with gluttony. By nature, contrary to the scale and unsound state of control of its activity, was the witch cult with surprisingly unascertained true state of affairs, though much regarding the Sin Archbishops especially was enveloped in mystery. Although the principal source for that was that the majority of people who happened upon them had lost their lives, the ones to have their names well known even amongst Sin Archbishops know, it is past tense, so the ones who had their names well known must have been the two of sloth and greed. Aside from those, even if it was identified that the Sin Archbishops of wrath and lust, and finally, gluttony existed, for several years it had been fogged with enigmas what kind of a bunch they were. Much less, the very existence of Louis Arneb, the youngest sister among the trio of siblings of gluttony, save for fellow Sin Archbishops being the only exception, was unknown. The concealed Sin Archbishop, that had been the position Louis Arneb stood at. Well, it's not as if we wished for it, you know. So whispered Louis, stretching her legs within the white space she had been in since birth. Impotently, Louis could not exit this white space, and did not have the ability to meet anyone. Unable to avail the authority of gluttony anywhere except in the location where it was highly restricted as well, it was what is called an unused treasured possession to her. However, thanks to her two elder brothers, only when it came to meals was she not incapacitated. That was because the memories and names her elder brothers ate, that is to say, the lives of others, she could unassociatedly snitch that food and be able to fulfill her hunger. Why do we have to be like this? Fulfilling her hunger through her elder brother's leftovers, whilst indulging in the lives of others, Louis, who was having her self-identity molded and taking form little by little, immediately discerned that she was in circumstances entirely different from others. Without a body that could be free, what she could operate was merely consciousness. Though she possessed the memories of having want, she possessed no experience of having want. That was the defective article known as herself. Ah! We are in such unhappy circumstances. That was how Louis recognized to herself that she was in a sorrowful environment. And she understood these circumstances shan't change, regardless how much she lamented. In order to console their younger sister lost adrift within such sorrow, her elder brothers seemingly vied with each other and ate. And provided their little sister the platters same as what they had eaten themselves. Those platters which her elder brothers served to her were brimming with respective individuality. Lay, who named himself Gourmet, loved lives with strong flavors for both better or worse. Roy, of bizarre eating, anyhow gave precedence to amount, becoming entranced for fulfilling hunger with off flavors. From Louis's perspective, if she had to say, then she had been able to enjoy the platters chosen by Lay on numerous occasions, but on numerous occasions she had also made gains from the platters chosen by Roy, who ate and hunted in an unprincipled manner. Chewing and digesting 11 lives, comparing flavors by rolling them atop her tongue and within her mind, what she came to understand. That was the difference in the absolute amount of joyfulness. Louis, who possessed the power to compare the lives of others through her own sense of values, graded various items such as the difference of wealth and poverty or the presence or absence of affection, from the environment of growth to family and friends, the existence of lovers, through a formula based on their extent, awarding scores to the lives of others from one to the next, and continued rating. For being prosperous by birth. For being loved by parents and siblings. For living a life sailing smooth without any trials or tribulations. For having a great number of friends who could be reached out to in times of difficulty. For possessing overflowing talent, such that it was possible to stand above all others. Either this or that, regardless of fortune and misfortune, countless reasons, such that some could be discarded. Though it was an idea terribly prideful and conceited, Louis possessed the authority to make it attainable. If it were to be expressed in alternate words, that was equivalent to the act of peeping onto the screen of a game other people were playing, complaining and pointing out they should have done this and they should have done that, all whilst ridiculing them. Knocking disdain and mockery across the entire screen, she criticized the lives of others as per her own conveniences as a bystander. Showering jeers as well, striking frank impressions lacking all distinction between likes and dislikes as well, all to her own contentment. Those were Louis's deeds. Rating as per her principles, egoistic abuse and slander. However, that which she enjoyed at first, soon turned wearisome as well. That was natural. What Louis could do, was to review the memories passed on to her, she could not interfere with anything further. She did not possess the ability to speak of the present and the future. Even if she tried to speak ill of or correct the gameplay of others, there was nobody who would lend an ear to what she would point out. That is why she lost her initial amusement. To incessantly look at the play of unskillful humans was close to torture rather than just being tedious. Even though if allowed to, then we would do it so much better. Because each and every single one is incompetent. Despite possessing feet to walk their own life, despite having arms to cut through distress, despite owning a head to picture the future, all of the other people were brainless. Lewis's elder brothers, Leigh and Roy, were no exceptions to that either. Rather, they could be called the incarnation of ineptitude. If memories would be peeped into, it could be well understood what that life failed at, and at what point was it unable to recover. All of them, accumulated failures, terribly simple and trivial. Why would one stumble at such a spot? Lewis was unable to comprehend at all. Incompetent, incompetent, incompetent. If you're going to live irresponsibly, then hand it over to us, that life. We will do it way, way, way better. Everyone is too brainless. From one to the next, lives ought to be felt contempt for were itemized in the form of platters. Chewing and digesting numerous, multitudinous of them, Lewis was overwhelmed with rage, and became nauseous. Without realizing such emotions of Lewis's, her elder brothers, who successively resumed eating for fulfilling their own desires, she also felt irritated at. Without even feeling anxious for their younger sister, who was making a nauseous expression, the folly of continuing to provide filled platters incessantly, what could she possibly detest? Could she not detest that? Ah, you sure eat while finding it delicious, Oni-chan. Ah, you sure eat while finding it fun, Anai-sama. Ah, we are, even now, feeling nauseous, you know. That was the reason why Louis Arneb named herself satiation. The starvation not fulfilled no matter how much is eaten. For what was starved was not her body, but her. Want to become happy. 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 Ah ha 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 ha. This is the feeling of walking outside, isn't it? Both Oni-chan and Anai-sama doing this the whole time. Ah, unfair. Within the enforced confinement, her shackled self-consciousness followed the lone road to expansion. Just as eating facilitated healthy growth amongst humans, while being provided with platters unwished for as well, Lewis underwent favorable growth vigorously. The same was also the case with Leigh and Roy, her two elder brothers. Her elder brothers too had their own ego enlarged rampantly, having their feel greater zeal for meals. The insensible food selection by such elder brothers of hers, Lewis anyhow felt irritated by. That change had been a byproduct of Lewis's such growth and irritation. This is the air of outside. This is the water of outside. This is the soil of outside. This is the blood of outside. Ah, amazing. It's real. It's real. Lying sprawled on bare earth, whilst lovingly licking the soil, having his fill of the world with his entire body, was a young boy. No, though that very flesh body belonged to the personage who named himself as Leigh Batten Kato's, the content within it was disparate. It was not Leigh wielding the right of control over that flesh body, and moving about freely. Believed to possess the fate of being unable to leave the white world congenitally, Louis Arneb, the sin archbishop of tragedy, it was her form having broken through the white cage for the first time. It had been a coincidence. Certainly, she did not think the authority possessed such an ability. Or perhaps Lewis's craving spirit had stimulated the authority to bloom instead. There was no definite answer. Neither was it momentous. What was momentous was that this had been realized. That she had walked outside. Ahahaha. Ahahaha. Intervening between her restricted reality, Lewis grandly guffawed for the fruit it bore. It had become possible for her to borrow her elder brothers' bodies, and independently manipulate that body, that authority. And... Leigh, just what is the meaning of this? While putting on airs as something like gourmet and being fastidious, are you sure you didn't get too hungry and go crazy? Ahahaha. That's wrong, that's completely wrong. That's wrong anyway, as that's wrong, that's certainly wrong, as that's certainly wrong, that is wrong, because that's wrong. We are, which cults an archbishop representing gluttony, Louis Arneb. Saying so, Lewis gave greetings to the baffled Roy Elford, using the body of Leigh Batten Kato's. For this had been the first time ever since she was born, did she get to even converse with her elder brothers, after all. It's the cute little sister, the third sibling of Oni-chan and Anai-sama. Please be loving, please be doting, please be well-wishing, and please be caring, okay? Want to become happy. 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 By borrowing the bodies of her elder brothers, she acquired a method to meddle with the outside world. Her elder brothers' supply of food did not halt, and as always, never did she suffer with hunger. However, such long-awaited opportunities, and jumping out into the outside world she much yearned for, Louis Arneb grew tired of it before long. She ended up growing tired it. Outside is pretty boring, more than what we thought. In the end, a borrowed body was a borrowed body. There lay no change in the fact that the real form of herself, who was unable to be free, was trapped inside the white world. Rather, by firmly making certain of her shadow, she strangled her throat by herself. In the end, something like life is not what you eat, or how much you eat, who you eat with, and yet. Her elder brothers were living lives of their own. For that must be why they were not seeking it. Louis alone had been dispossessed of her own life. For that must be why she was eternally seeking it. Want to become happy. Within the white world, whilst untidily scattering around countless memories, she wished for that with all her. That could have perhaps been the greatest or the sole desire of Louis Arneb. Want to become happy. A desire unfulfilled. Unfading regardless of her borrowing the bodies of her elder brothers, or kicking others as per her liking. Albeit tasting rich lives and getting drunk on momentary pleasures, it all perished immediately. Want to become happy. She grew tired of it. She had grown tired of it. She wished for a life which belonged to herself and her alone. She wished for a body, a soul, a destiny. Want to become happy. Louis was sorrowful. The origin of Louis's sorrow was that nowhere present a life which was her own. Want to become happy. However, at the same time, Louis knew herself. Even if her fickle-natured, easily resigning self attained a life that suddenly appeared before her, it would be inconceivable for her to be satisfied by that. After all, she had known. In this world lay countless lives, in them lay the absolute amount of joyfulness, and they were primarily determined upon the result of the incorrigible great gambles. In what way would things play out for a human belonging to a poor residence born into the harsh holy kingdom of Castico? In what way would things play out for a human weak by birth born into Wallachia Empire, which valued warriors? In what way would things play out for a slow-footed nitwit born into Kararaji city-states, which expected perpetual progress? In what way would things play out for a mixed race, a silver-haired half-devil born into the kingdom of Lugnica, which was spoiled by ancient customs? By possessing the selves of others, Louis was aware that they would not have a decent time. However, to say joyfulness would be being affluent in those aspects would be an immense mistake as well. Being born into the household of a great priest in the holy kingdom of Castico, being born into the household of a general in Wallachia Empire, being born into the household of a distinguished merchant in Kararaji city-states, being born into the household of any kind of an influential noble in the kingdom of Lugnica, as one looked upward it continued without cease. Louis did not want to be inferior. She wanted to be affluent. She did not want to be looked down upon. She had continued rating the lives of others. Within those, naturally the lives who had received the worst evaluation, but with all the lives who had received the highest evaluation, it was not as if all of the items to be graded within them were the greatest. Even those highest evaluated lives, she could not gain satisfaction by. Want to become happy. Lay and Roy, around that time, discovered a novel transfiguration of the authority eclipse. The ability the authority of gluttony was endowed with, was the ability to plunder the memories, the names, from others, chewing and digesting them. Applying that in practical use, the authority of solar eclipse and lunar eclipse which reconstructed the plundered populace. Drawing out techniques or knowledge from the memories of others, and using them as one's own belonging, lunar eclipse. To the utmost it drew out skills, not the benefits of the likes of physical abilities, so the possibility of not utilizing that power perfectly was high. Conversely, solar eclipse used the captured name as foundation, and reconstructed the person's existence in its entirety, completely reconstructing the techniques polished by that flesh body. It could manifest strength to its maximum. As an ability, it went without saying that solar eclipse was overwhelmingly excelling, but her two elder brothers preferred to exercise not solar eclipse, but lunar eclipse. No, perhaps it would be more accurate to say that they feared using solar eclipse, and found it repugnant. According to Lay and Roy's cognizance, solar eclipse seemed to drag along the thinking in the flesh body which had transformed. That sensation felt as if their selves were being damaged, it was unendurable, was the two's reasoning. Hearing what her elder brothers had to say, Louis, from the bottom of her, found it to be utterly ludicrous. Despite even possessing their own flesh bodies, despite standing on a position where even their person had been established, to not be able to preserve their selves possessing firm beliefs, how deficient and puny must that self-consciousness be? It was no jest to assume the heirs of being more sorrowful than her, who possessed no flesh body of her own, did not have even her siblings be cognizant of her existence for greater than 10 years, and had, at last, grown tired of even the sourness and sweetness of life. The authority of solar eclipse was very much splendid. Rather, for Louis it was convenient. It would be no misstatement to say that precisely this was the power Louis Arneb longed for. Louis Arneb was craving for a life belonging to her alone, that too, a life which was the greatest. That was unlike her elder brother's self-pleasure, who gained contentment by eating the lives of others and capturing memories. A right further refined and ubiquitous Louis wanted to live. Birth could not be chosen. That was the entire source of what brought forth sorrowful humans. However, Louis was different. Louis had acquired the power, the opportunity, to choose her birth, her life. She could heist the memories of others, reconstruct them by way of solar eclipse, and make it to be her own belonging. She had the ability to choose life. Everything, she could choose again. She shall be fastidious, seeking the greatest memories and name which she was yet to see. Though there had been some aligned favorably amongst what all Lay and Roy had eaten, they had not been perfect. There had been a dearth of novelty and ingenuity. Happy homes, tender parents, wealthy livelihoods and rich environments, magnificent friends and seemingly destined companions, all of it seemed naught but happiness which had seemingly been seen somewhere else. She was searching for not that, but the greatest life. Having the ability to choose as per one's liking did not coincide with the fact that one would not get tired of what one was choosing. Getting tired of the countless platters lined up before her eyes, what could she possibly find enjoyable? Louis Arneb was searching for the greatest life. She had been searching. That is why. That is why, when she happened upon Natsuki Subaru, Louis's chest pulsated intensely. Oh ho! Oniai-san is… Natsuki Subaru, was it? To be precise, it did not throb the instant she had met him. Natsuki Subaru's outward appearance was not to Louis's taste, to make it throb the instant of meeting him. From start, though it seemed a face not to her taste, in accordance with the sense of values cultivated within Louis, the beauty which a vast majority of humans pictured would precisely be the face Louis would seek. In that sense, there did not exist even a single atom which would throb for Natsuki Subaru's outward appearance. Moreover, from Louis's perspective, Natsuki Subaru was certainly a personage she had already known, but he was not someone she had been attentive of simply because he was in the memories of others. Though it was something not requiring much thought, the memories present within Louis went up to enormous numbers. It was not simple to draw out the intended memories from within that. All the more when the opponent was one she held no interest in. The reason why Louis yet recollected the opponent's name at a single glance was because, not Louis, but one of her elder brothers Lay-Batten Kato's had been considerably attached to that name. If not mistaken, then there had been something mightily attached to Natsuki Subaru amongst the platters Lay had eaten. This place? This place you see, is the cradle of Od Lagna. The Hall of Memories. The place where the souls of dead people are filtered. As it's rare for a person to come here maintaining oneself, you shall be welcomed, Oniai-san. We have too much boredom at hand, you see. Smiling sinisterly, Louis gave a warm reception to the visit of the rare guest. Truth be told, there lay no dishonesty in those feelings of welcome. Louis longed for others, quite a bit. The birthplace of Louis Arneb, the white world she could not leave, the Hall of Memories. The reason why Louis was aware that this place had been designated that title, that the gigantic existence of unknown disposition was a workshop of such an enormous scale, was the result of her generally mobilizing the knowledge of the memories which Lay or Roy had eaten and hunted down. Within the once fallen prey to the authority of gluttony, there had been many wise men who, in reality, had done great studies which would remain for posterity, and had made historical findings. Without seeing the light of day, they had settled into the soul of the bellies of the three gluttony siblings, but they were profoundly serving Louis. In all honesty, Louis was not at all interested in the reason why she was born here, or why she was confined here. Neither would there be any means to dispel those doubts, nor did she find it to be meaningful. She had assented it as that's just how things were. Even if she was suddenly taken into the outside world at this point, it would have merely been troublesome in its own way. The day she shall leave this place must be the day she has discovered the greatest life. Sorry, name-giving was still left, isn't it? But, do forgive. After all, introducing like this while being sober doesn't happen often in this place, you see. Well then, guess its introduction one more time. We are witch cults and Archbishop representing gluttony, Louis Arneb. Don't know if it'll be for a long time or short, but please be caring, okay, Oniai-san? The opponent was exceedingly surprised and distressed with regards to Louis, who named herself in that manner. Obviously enough, standardly, humans who step a foot here do not possess the aim of coming here. Though occasionally there are some who thus slip in, Louis considered that as something like lost souls rephrasing, the consequence of near-death experiences. A situation where the soul was easily separated from the flesh body, or a situation where it had come unstuck, perhaps. From their perspectives, such situations were close to the feeling of being summoned out of the blue by Od Lagna. If that were to be considered, possibly, Lewis's role was something like a guide who quelled the turmoil of people who had experienced near-death, and elucidated what this place was. If that were to be considered as being atop O.D. Lagna's invisible palm, that was, again, infuriating. Of course, being looked down upon, but Lewis also despised being directed. That was the same as O.D. Lagna, an existence for whom that perpetually was the usual state of things. Lewis did not want her life, which yet remained to commence, to be distorted by the interference of anyone but Lewis. Of course we do know. Lei and Roy. Oniai-chan and Nai-sama, right? Don't get so excited, Oniai-san. As the two are just devoted to their little sister, you know. The two of them devouring here and there too, part of it is for our sake. They lack brains, and don't have a grasp on our preferences at all either, but they are being considerate. Probably, isn't it? But it can't be helped, isn't it? After all three of us have never even been together. By borrowing Oniai-chan or Nai-sama's body, you see, we have gone outside a wee bit on times, you know? But, when we do that, the one lending his body goes to sleep and can't be met, is what that means. That's why, all three of us have never been together. Awa spilled that out. Enumerating while speaking rapidly in somewhat agitation, Lewis carefully observed the opponent's reaction. Slight panic, just a smidgen of daze. Somewhat preponderant rage, and a fairly strong sense of purpose. What was perplexed at first, had now regained presence of mind, possessing the ambience of trying to proceed ahead logically. Not bad, with that thought in her innermost, Lewis licked her lips. Whether it should be labeled as being accustomed to diving into scenes of carnage, he was suitably fast in adapting to situations. If observed and compared with the impression she had received at first, that was quite a mismatching attribute. That which varied greatly from the original attribute, a posteriori, too, was an attribute compelled into polishing. What lay at its origin, Lewis incited her appetite with interest, and alongside. There it is. This is it, right, Oniai-san? Whilst conversing, what Lewis towed out were certain memories. The greatest reason why Lei, through a single platter which Lei had indulged in, was attached to the juvenile before her eyes. Reeling in and collecting the memories mightily, potently calling out to that existence, Lewis synchronized with them. Awa. At that precise moment, her breathing was obturated by feelings of love overflowing out in the interior of her chest. Welling up unaware of any bounds, the feelings of love for the juvenile within her sight. He was so beloved, so in love with, it was unbearable. Lewis's small chest hottened, and her entire body throbbed with a sweet premonition. With her eyes moist, her breath sweet and warm, her lips smiled. And... Please don't make such an anxious face. Sabarukuan. Upon that instant, there existed mighty, potent rejection. Honing his eyes whilst maintaining his rage, Natsuki Subaru charged ahead and pounced. Though she possessed the impulse to accept his outbursting self by spreading both her arms wide, she somehow immobilized that and sharply crawled into his chest in accordance with memories. Catching a hold of the juvenile's arms with smooth movement, pulling him towards herself, she gave him a twisting throw. With a flesh body which was not a real object, hallucinating the sound of his bones creaking, the juvenile, giving rise to a roar of anguish, was held down onto the white floor by her. Please stop. If you throw yourself so bravely, it will be embarrassing. Something like that. Utilizing the memories which thought lovingly of the juvenile, she held the juvenile down through sheer force. With her sadistic fulfilled, she ended up relaxing the edges of her mouth. As if giving further satisfaction to that desire to afflict belonging to Lewis's, frantically continuing to scream was Natsuki Subaru's voice, as he twisted his body. His form, earnestly calling for rage for the sake of someone else upon that, incidentally, Lewis tilted her head. Oniai-san, why do you remember the memories we had stolen? It had been an unnatural response. Perceiving that whilst holding him down, Lewis greatly twisted her neck. The memories eaten by gluttony did not remain extant within the person concerned, the names eaten by gluttony did not remain extant within other people. That is because the authority tore them off from the soul, which defined existence in the world. The proper cleansing of the soul by O.D. Lagna, which was practiced in the Hall of Memories, arbitrarily acting as its agent, and stealthily deceiving, plundering, and harvesting, was what the authority of gluttony was. Therefore, the memories and names snabbled by gluttony did not remain extant within anyone. Restrictively, though there had been ones who had only memories, only names stolen away, respective negative effects got applied. If the memories were stolen, then said person, if the name was stolen, then other people, could no longer remember the person concerned. That could not be altered as long as the disposition of the soul remained within the protection of O.D. Lagna. Yet, Natsuki Subaru did remember. The ingredient, the soul which had been rendered naked, having both sides of memories and name gotten stolen. despite not being supposed to be able to remember it. Why, why? We may have developed a bit of interest in Oni-san now. Though it seems Oni-chan will resent us. Licking her lips, Lewis dyed her cheeks with welling passion. It was the opponent Lei had been attached to. To have that food snitched detachedly from the side would surely make even Lei take befitting offense. Though Lei was actually quite soft and sweet to his little sister, the major premise of him listening to her selfishness was to the utmost until they did not cross each other's appetite. Appetite was gluttony was the meaning of living for Lewis, for Lei, and for Roy as well. To have that be invaded arbitrarily could not let there remain calm. If a dear platter that has been looked forward to is usurped, even if by a sibling, even killing them would be something that can't be helped, isn't it? Ah, but, how irresistible, Oni-san. Whilst twisting his arms behind his back, she drew her lips closer to the nape of the juvenile pushed onto the floor. It was something alike the form of the spirit with no true substance. She could not sense the taste of sweat from him, who was in the state of mere soul. Though by nature, even pain was something similar to hallucination, she did not intend to expressly inform him. Merely, the feelings of love she wanted to be in contact with erupted. It seemed the owner of these memories had been attached to this juvenile greater than what was appropriate. She could feel that strongly. Well, right now that goes for us. Should it even be a hearsay memory, now that it had been stored like this, it belonged to her. She could slightly understand Lei or Roy's feeling of fear for Eclipse. She held no fear, but she did understand that the two's premonition was correct. Perhaps, if she continued at this pace, we will certainly end up loving Oni-san, isn't it? Nauseating you say, that is so harsh. Because despite everything we are still a girl, even though we mustered up courage and confessed, how cruel. Ah, you're acting violently again. That won't do, Oni-san. It won't hurt, so please calm down, okay? There's no way we would hurt Oni-san, you know. After all, he is so beloved. That's why calm your. No matter her tenderly addressing him in an effort to calm him down, she faced opposition through frantic meager movement. With the name of the memories called countless times, Lewis had her entire body tremble with a sensation terribly ecstatic. This ecstasy could only be tasted from a personage remembering one who had their name stolen. Namely, a flavor which Lewis had never tasted. An unknown, sweet berry. Natsuki Subaru. What shall your flavor be? Let's eat. Seeking the answer to that glacé inquisitiveness of her, Lewis tenderly licked the juvenile's nape with her scarlet tongue. Calling his name, whilst tasting a lanuginous texture on the tip of her tongue, amiably, suavely, she licked. In the significance of being fulfilled, what was termed as appetite lay similar to sexual desire. Within such strengthening of affection for the person before her eyes, for even this unremitting appetite to be fulfilled, this must now be something alike copulation sought after sordidly. People who mutually valued each other, blend within the existence known as Lewis. The sufficiency of that flavor, or how a saccharine a thing would it be? Thank you for the treat. Savoring adequately, as per her contentment, Lewis conveyed her gratitude for the food through words. That was the procedure of gluttony's meal, invoking the name of the opponent whose memories are desired to be stolen, peeling off one section of the soul from the opponent's flesh body, and eating that. What are termed as memories are things similar to sediments accumulated upon the soul. It was also possible to adorn that with alluring words, such as feasts dished upon white platters. However, should everything be exposed to its origin, what shall be stretching before would be the meaninglessness of adorning it beautifully. That was the cognizance of Lewis, who was affixed with the authority of gluttony, and the ability to indulge in those souls, Lewis's privilege. With this, the entirety of what was associated with the soul of the juvenile before her eyes shall get particularized. What would then remain, would be for her to mix it with the memories of the young girl already within Lewis, then have her fill of what nature of chemical reaction it would cause. You, just now, what did you do to me? With a voice not supposed to be audible echoing, for the first time, Lewis faced Natsuki Subaru himself. Until then it had not seemed like they had been conversing. They had not faced each other as if facing each other. It had been naught but such a vague, drowning dream. That was, for Lewis too, an occasion of never-before-seen circumstances, abruptly getting tinged with colors. What had been said, just now? Oni-san, it can't be, you remember us? A gaze charged with mighty, potent animosity, was the answer to Lewis's doubt. Ah. That had been the moment Lewis's slim, petite chest throbbed at a definite high rate of pulsation. Why, in spite of getting memories eaten, could he remain composed? Why, even now, was he glaring at Lewis with such a look in his eyes? Why, despite within such bewilderment, was Lewis having her chest throb so intensely? why. Rather, that could have perhaps been the impetus deserving to be called premonition. Why, does Oni-san remember us? Whilst glaring at the back of Natsuki Subaru's head, under her eyes, whom she had held down, what Lewis suspected at first was the possibility of having failed at the meal. In the authority of Lewis and the others, of gluttony there were a certain set of protocols absolutely necessary. The prime amongst them was to know the name of the opponent who was to be eaten. This was an indispensable element necessary for meddling with the soul of the opponent. Therefore, in the case of seizing an alias, the authority was rendered powerless. And, till now there had been a number of cases of having failed at the meal. In those cases, the one to face the painful experience had always been either one of Lei or Roy, so not even once had Lewis herself faced the painful experience, but Oni-chan and Nai-sama felt unpleasant, like it was painful, but Lewis stiffened up her body, assuming there would be similar recoil upon her. However, though she waited for a long time, there were no signs of that supposed recoil rushing upon Lewis. To begin with, new memories were certainly being poured within Lewis. Watchtower of the Sage, dear comrades, and there were trials. Murmuring indicating approval, as if carefully reading a single book within her mind, Lewis became entranced with excavating through the new memories. Appending to the fact that there occurred no recoil, she was being successful in the extortion of memories. Referring to those memories, she had comprehended what Natsuki Subaru and his comrades were doing, and even the sequence of events due to which he strayed into this hall of memories. What remained was for Natsuki Subaru's specialness to be Upon that instant, the voluminousness of the impact which was firmly placed upon Lewis, what words shall be apt enough to describe it? Astounded due to the overwhelming substance, with the strength in her arms fading, she whitened her eyes. Prodding that interval, the held-down Natsuki Subaru made his escape from Lewis' arms. Taking distance at the same pace, he took a fighting pose nothing too impressive. Though it was opposition rather comical and creasing up, Lewis was not made to laugh at it. There existed no scope for her to be laughing over that. The impact of having seen something improbable was stabbing through Lewis's petite physique. That was. Why, are there memories of the time of dying? No, that's not all. That's not all, Oni-san. It's of course strange to have the memories of the time of dying. Plenty odd, you know. But, it's strange. After all, in the memories we ate, there's nothing like the memories of killing Oni-san, yet Oni-san has the memories of getting killed. That was something abnormal. There was no origin, what was occurring was a mysterious paradox. The influence of Natsuki Subaru's memories, the repertoire of words originally she was not supposed to be aware of increase. It was a paradox. Under the emergency due to the paradox, Schrödinger's Maxwell's Einstein was Nikola Tesla. What is this? What's the meaning of this? Memories are different from delusion, you know. The sediment stuck onto the soul can't be distorted or bent as how one pleases. That's why. This is the world Oni-san witnessed Sue. This is the history Oni-san tasted. This is the story of Oni-san, only Oni-san knows Sue. Putting her fingers into her long golden-colored hair, Lewis detonated her flaring impulse. Not even for a single second could she remain without hurling it instead of simply stockpiling this impulse. The very instant she did so, Lewis Arneb erupted. Erupting and scattering across in all directions, her mind was fractionated into tiny fragments. New sense of values Sue. It had been her meeting with that. Her meeting with an article which surpassed all imagination, which Lewis had not known, had not seen, had not thought of. Her entire body transfixed by lightning, she was unable to think of anything else but that. What else could this be possibly called, should it not be called destiny? What name should possibly be affixed to these emotions? Oni-san, could it be you're the same as us? Aren't you a Sin Archbishop? Though we have never met directly, Petalgue said so. That the factors were supposed to have reached. That since the positions of sins were filled, eventually everyone would gather. That vacant seat is the seat belonging to Oni-san. Belonging to me, is it not? Ahahahahahaha. Don't get angry please, Oni-san. Don't make us perplexed, any more than this, Oni-san. At this point, our mind is at its absolute limit, this small chest is about to burst open, it really hurts. Amazing. Tapping continuously, striking the temple of her own forehead with her fingers, Lewis chewed the memories down to its very bones. Difficult to believe in. Unable to be believed in. The margin of having it believed in existed only in a fortuitous meeting with none but gluttony. Since Lewis could jointly own the same memories, she could believe in Natsuki Subaru's progression. No, she could not believe in it, but savvy it as fact. For this was the journey Lewis Arneb had traversed as well. Ah, what pride! Unfair. Unfair, unfair. Unfair, 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 unfair. Wonderful Sue. Onie-san, you really die again and again, again and again and again, isn't it? Wow, amazing. You're really dying. You're dying so miserably, Onie-san. Again and again, you're dying without any method of succeeding, Onie-san. Even something like this is possible, right, Onie-san? A round of applause, a standing ovation, congratulations for taking birth. Gratitude for the miracle of meeting you, the train to future which shall advance with me. Welling forth inspiration. Receiving stimulus and innovation. Onie-san, so you came from a place not here, not anywhere, huh? Ah, we can't even think, anymore. Spouting sentiments without confining her momentum, Lewis, who was unreservedly immersed by it making no effort for resistance, suddenly recognized that potentiality. No, she inclined her ears towards her inner voice. To know a scenery unknown, to have taken birth in a world untold, all were finest quality full courses which would fulfill the hunger called the inquisitiveness of Lewis's. However, the speciality of Natsuki Subaru which was deserving of utmost attention was memories of death. Not supposed to exist. Absolutely unattainable, there existed the memories of death and beyond. This was principally dissimilar to something like near-death experiences, which were like cheap test tours. A phenomenon established due to the soul-shattering, life slashed into 1,000 fragments, the lifeline terminating in its true essence. The other side of the river of three crossings, the border of the living world and netherworld, which was impossible to rebound from. Neither swimming through it nor striding across it, the memories of redoing the life supposed to have been robbed away. Return by death. That was how Lewis read the greatest showpiece of the memories blossoming within herself. Accumulating the experiences of sundry deaths as memories, that which could not be carved into memories even once he handed over to his next self as something certain. And that Natsuki Subaru had surmounted all kinds of hardships. Amazing, amazing, Onie-san. Truly amazing. We've been moved deeply. We admire it from the bottom of our. You really can do something like that. Overcoming death, with complete freedom. No need to be modest. We are serious, you know? We really do find Onie-san to be enviable. After all, something like the memories of death, nobody possesses it no matter what, Sue. Also, why is it so? Why are you all composed despite getting memories stolen by us? What specialness is it, soul save? Backup? Invariance? Makes no sense. Within the struggling, writhing Natsuki Subaru existed numerous, multitudinous memories of the time of dying. That was stimulation Lewis, by no means, managed to acquire. Furthermore, to continue to die interminably, the power with the ability to stockpile death was the target of her jealousy. Want it. She desired the power of return by death. Not for it being capable of repeating death. Naturally, that fresh stimulation was also a factor eternally captivating Lewis, but what was further momentous was the ability to redo. Lewis Arneb was searching for the greatest life. And the conclusion derived by Lewis, having indulged in diverse lives, was that what was termed as the greatest life was neither being affluent, nor being loved by many, nor being blessed with a high status. What was termed as the greatest life referred to the life which went as one wished. Anything and everything would occur as one believed, as one expected, as one wished. Without any flaws, without any incompletion, without any irrationality, the perfect worldview. She had always searched a method for its realization. The answer to that was an endlessly unbearing darkness within Lewis, but finally, she understood. It has returned by death. Should she procure that, she would be able to recover from conflicts, from failures. Should she know what shall happen in future, she would be able to cope with it. If only she can know, what failure shall occur, what irrationality shall await, what incompletion shall she come across. We can live the greatest life. What should be done? What should be done in order to steal it? If Onie-san's return by death is an authority, then it can't be stolen by just eating. It's different from things that come attached with memories and names. Which factors are the antithesis of Od Lagna, after all? It won't come detached easily. That's why. That is why, was an authority to be stolen, there was no choice but to steal the which factor itself. However, even Lewis was unaware of a method to steal as far as which factors. Until now, never had she wished for an authority belonging to other Sin archbishops. That kind of a bunch was disgusting to even come in contact with. However, Oni-san, the authority of the killed Betelgeuse, you're using it. The unseen hand present within the memories had weakened in both numbers and range from the original, but indubitably was the power utilized by that lunatic. In other words, that was none but proof that several witch factors were being stocked in the interior of Natsuki Subaru. Stocking witch factors, if that was possible then. We will absolutely, no matter what, get our hands on Return by Death. Oni-san's authority is our hope. If that can be obtained, we will. We will be able to live our own life too. Want to become happy. 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 The method for that is right there. The method for that. Sue. Huck. How arbitrary. Something like Return by Death is nothing so good? A person possessing it can't understand the feelings of a person who doesn't possess it. Sue. Something like allotted persuasion, which had seemingly been heard somewhere else, was nothing but tedious. One who had continued using that power as per his contentment, disliking using that power, seemed foolish. That is why she shall definitely obtain it. Absolutely, definitely, with certainty. What shall be done? What shall be done in order to steal the authority? Wrong. That's wrong. It's wrong anyway, as it's wrong. Certainly it is wrong, as it's too wrong. We're saying it's wrong because it is wrong. Sue. Gluttonous drinking. Sue. Glutton eats. Sue. Clapping her hands mightily, potently, Lewis whitened her eyes. Unraveling her sharp fangs, she applauded, suggesting how clear-headed herself was. Before one could notice, the means and objective switched positions. However, that wasn't the case. That was not the case. Lewis's objective was not to plunder because she wanted to return by death, because she could amusingly live the greatest life by obtaining return by death. It was no good to have the bad habit of considering things hazardously remain clinging, because of having played something like Sin Archbishop representing gluttony for a long period of time. Problematic. Imprisoning in fixated notions. That was a cause of defeat. It was simple. If it was not to plunder, but to obtain, it'll be fine if we just become. It'll be fine if we just become Oni-san. If we become Oni-san and have him be consumed by the authority of gluttony, we can integrate witch factors. Since if it's Oni-san, then they can be stocked. Saying so, Lewis plucked her cheeks with both her hands, continuously, forcefully, tempted into violence. Not an endearing gesture, but excruciating, she did so wielding the intention of injuring. For what purpose? To tear apart her flesh and blood, and dividing herself, that was the purpose. You know the three great witch beasts? It's said that those are monsters created by the owner of the witch factor long before us. We too can do something similar. We didn't do that because there wasn't really any meaning in doing so. But, you see, if we think of doing it, then we can do anything. If we think of doing it, then we can do anything. That was what is called the monster of potentiality. That was what is called the potentiality of a pure existence, prior to taking birth. That was one affixed with the destiny of living the greatest life, hereafter in the future. That was the destiny of the utmost joyful being, named Louis Arneb. That is, the existence known as us. The speech of the slowly spinning Louis was overlapped and enunciated. The phenomenon of hearing the same voice doubled was not some kind of auditory hallucination or mishearing. That was in accordance with the occurrence happening, for there appeared two of the same people, with the same voice, with the same tone. Got surprised by Oni-san's memories, but Arneb is a star of the constellation of the hare, huh? It was also astonishing that Oni-san and the others were the ones to destroy the sizable hare too. But, if that's the case, then it doesn't become too much of a surprise? How come we multiplied, or is it Oni-san's great delight that cute Louis John multiplied? No, huh? No, eh. So Oni-san is the type who doesn't sexually desire little girls. Is that so? Observing the opponent who was frozen in place, with his eyes widened in astonishment, Louis linked her shoulders with the existence standing immediately beside her, namely, the same Louis. Within this place, called the Hall of Memories, which was separated from reality, Louis was merely an existence of a witch factor possessing no flesh, body and a soul joined together. Other than that, it rather seemed that the respective names of the three siblings corresponded with the three great witch beasts, though that, well, did not matter. Anyhow, separating the witch factor into two, Louis Arneb multiplied into two. This was a stunt perhaps Lay and Roy, who feared losing their selves upon the utilization of solar eclipse, those two were not capable of. To know it was possible to duplicate oneself, also tied together with forfeiting the true essence of one's real self. However, that did not apply to Lewis, whose self had been established as vague from start. It was possible to have one Lewis, two Lewis, and so on. With this, Lewis Arneb obtaining Natsuki Subaru's authority was. What? The juvenile, the receptacle of the witch factor, declared some words. Upon glancing at the juvenile, aside from the glamour called return by death, simply feelings of love welled up. Finding that annoying, Lewis abandoned the memories emerging to the surface. Upon peeling them off of her own soul, she discarded and abandoned them with the notion of them being useless. No, that was not simply a notion. Truth be told, they were indeed useless now. All of the memories had been mere fillers until the greatest life was discovered, not but side dishes. However, Lewis Arneb had finally reached her full course. If we think of doing it, then we can do anything. That is why she shall tread onto this path. Eating into Natsuki Subaru, from the interior. Chewing the eaten into Natsuki Subaru, from the exterior, sparing not a single bit. Lewis Arneb shall obtain Natsuki Subaru. ULL. Until the very end of the end, the receptacle continued saying something. However, what had it been saying? Something like that no longer held any relevance. Licking the sediment stuck onto the soul with her tongue, Lewis inherited the memories. And, within the receptacle which had forgotten anything and everything, Lewis personally had herself appended to the witch factor. As for the rest, it's fine to simply wait for completion. Unremittingly waiting in the Hall of Memories was something she had grown all too accustomed to. Problem lied in the usage of the memories. There was a scheme for stealing memories once again from an opponent who had already been eaten once. The gourmet authority did not deem the menu of the same name, the same taste as a separate article in its judgment. That is why there present was a need to alter the flavor from the soul into an article separate to such an extent that it was not possible to recall that it had once been atop the tongue of Lewis, of gluttony. Anticipating it proves to be the taste of the finest quality, that which Lewis Arneb had fervidly awaited. Hoping it achieves completion into the greatest, utmost, supreme dish. Looking forward to that moment, whilst licking her lips, and longing. So, did you get to see what you wanted to see? Lewis Arneb. Lewis, huh? Upon the sudden accost, Lewis, who had gained awakening of her consciousness, rounded her eyes. Blinking a few times, she made certain of her location. White environs, white ground and white skies, standing within the world blanketed white, Lewis had been making a stupefied expression. Lewis. Having her hand touch her face, making contact, she made certain of the sensation. Since there was no mirror in this place she could not take a look, but this sensation was irrefutably her own face. With there not being even any moderate amusements in this place, speaking of things touchable, only her own face, own body counted as one. That is why she had touched her face to an extent one would grow sick of touching it. That is why, upon touching her face she had grown sick of touching, she could immediately know in what state her face, her body was. Just as before. Yes, just as before. This was Lewis's own body. Did you get to see what you wanted to see, huh? Slowly, stupefied, making certain of herself was Lewis. With that behavior reaching a point where it could pause, abruptly, the accost now overlapped once again. Lifting her face, Lewis looked at the personage who had been standing before her, in front of her eyes all along. Rather short black hair and stabbing sanpaku eyes, with legs the same length as his body, wearing a shabby appearance, was the juvenile. His name, Natsuki Subaru. The existence Lewis herself had become one with as a witch factor, and Lewis, and the being of unimaginable insanity, wielding the authority which had the ability to return by death. Lewis, no, Otsu. Lewis opened her mouth and roared. As long as the strength remained, as long as the possibility remained, with complete devotion she roared. Should she have not done that, she would get crushed by the pressure. By the terror, by the menace, by the despair. She would get snared in the insanity of a lunatic who repeated and resumed continuing death time after time. Lewis, don't want to die. We don't want to die. Hate it, 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 hate it. Hate it. Hated Sue. Swinging her head, collapsing onto the bare ground, Lewis frantically appealed while drawing back. Assimilating with that existence, Lewis had personally experienced death. She had tasted it. By being taken in by the soul who practiced return by death by her own volition, she had experienced return by death firsthand, which turned back even time. The memories of death that had been incomplete as merely Natsuki Subaru's memories. After all, memories were not but memories. The sensational impact of never returning again upon letting go even once of that instant, of that juncture, of that moment, could never be obtained. That had been why she thirsted for that. She had thirsted for what flavor death had. Even if death had been something less vivid than what Lewis had expected, using the authority that goes by the name of return by death, she could gain sufficient change with the right to walk a life in which redoing was a possibility. That is what she believed. Until she herself tasted death, that is. Lewis, something like that. Something like that can never be withstood. That anguish. Sense of loss. No way can it be withstood. Impossible. Impossible, impossible. Absolutely impossible. Hate it. Not even once had she possessed a way to die comfortably. Not even once had she felt death to be luscious. Not even once had she wished to die on her own volition. Natsuki Subaru had tasted that greater than 20 times, and had replayed that. Lewis, someone who can withstand that, is not human. Monster. A monster too. She could not. No way she could. Lewis had indulged in a great number of lives, affronted all kinds of souls, and had searched a life of her own. She believed she had possessed the right, the privilege, to do so. That is why she stretched her hands even into the soul of Natsuki Subaru. The consequence, she got her naive shattered. Because Lewis, the human heart, cannot withstand something like itself dying too. Want to become happy. 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 Wanted to become happy. Wanted to become happy. That was the wish Louis Arneb had envisaged all along, for the whole time. Trampling upon all aspects of everything, she possessed the right to exercise her power for the purpose of acquiring the greatest life. Louis had remained, believing so without any pangs of conscience whatsoever, until today. That premise crumbled. Wanted to become happy. However, right now, the wish right now was different. Louis, don't want to die. 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 Don't want to die, 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 don't want to. Die, don't want to 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 die. Subaru, that is why, when you were trying to eat me, I told you. Her arms hugging her head, cowering, shaking her head in fear, desperately trying to protect herself was Louis. In close proximity to that Louis, immediately above Louis, who did not raise her face, onward came a voice descending. She did not want to listen to even that. Listening was terrifying. However, something which may befall upon her due to not listening was terrifying. Dying was frightening. That is why she had no choice but to listen. And, whilst looking down upon Louis curling herself in fear, the voice continued. Its preface, saying you had been warned. Subaru, that you'll definitely regret it. Chapter 76, The Hell Bearing the Name of Oneself. With the young girl who had experienced return by death and was sobbing with her hands on her head before his eyes, Natsuki Subaru intently stared at his own poem. It was not as if he was feeling hurt after having been called a monster, after having been spoken ill of. That he was crazy. That it was impossible to withstand, he agreed with those notions as well. Subaru himself had died countless times until now. He was aware of something as basic as those experiences being unordinary. But he had simply gritted his teeth and endured it. Believing with all his heart that it would be better for him to suffer than the death of someone aside from himself, a friend or an acquaintance, people whose names and faces he did not know, his precious comrades or the people he loved. That was Subaru. Yeah, I sure am amazing, right, Natsuki Subaru? Tightly clenching the fist he had been gazing, Subaru sang his own praises from the bottom of his heart. He had been commended, through loose-lipped logic impossible to be held true. Such words had been used as if to console oneself, or for encouraging oneself. However, the singing his own praises just now had been different. The memories and real experience which had observed the existence named Natsuki Subaru terribly objectively, or commending the path oneself had walked until now. Subaru, dang. I'm unexpectedly a pretty big deal, huh? And that was something which Natsuki Subaru, who had lost his memories and had returned to the starting point of being summoned into the different world, and ultimately reached this point after taking a deep read of the books of the dead, could also be told. Starting from being ignorant with regards to the different world, accumulating personal experiences of death sufficient to equal the single year Subaru had lived through, and had returned without letting his heart shatter into pieces, impressively. Thanks to that, the lost memories and the memories thereafter had been unified. Subaru, Meili, Shala, entrusted to me, and I will take responsibility for them. Meili, for whom murder had become a habit, and had locked herself into a dark future. Shala, who had been liberated from a vain wait which lasted for 400 years, and wished to continue the blessed present. Subaru, Ram and Julius, both of them sure act unreasonably. For those two to be doing that, that's quite a feat. Ram, who already knew the best possible option, and displayed prudence more reliable than anyone. Julius, who had lost his own resort, yet embraced faith and still resumed holding the sword. Subaru, Beatrice and Echidna, I've really been a bother to them as well. Geez, I'm such a... Beatrice, who dedicatedly supported Subaru, and noticed the limits of his heart before anyone else. Echidna, who was utmost suspicious regarding Subaru's amnesia, and had granted him forgiveness at its extremity. And, no matter if he lost his memories, no matter how many times he redid, he ultimately returned to the path of being drawn towards you. He wanted to do that. He must do that. He could not think of any other path. That is how much you are. Subaru, empt. With love and certain tranquility on his lips, Subaru raised his face. And looked at Louis, who still had her face covered and was shivering. Subaru, hey. Louis, eek hook. Subaru, you're too scared. Subaru scratched his cheek with a single finger upon her being excessively frightened by a single call. She was a young girl with an outward appearance which could unobjectionably be called young. The form of that young girl shivering in fear, desperately rejecting the world, was a sight heavy to the chest. It seemed she had been endowed with something akin to fleeting fragility which would make one thoughtlessly extend a hand to her, by birth. Surely, an attainment of the nature to undo the opponent's vigilance and crawling into their interior. That could perhaps be a crystal pure like a child that had been coercively refined. That Louis Arneb, who did not know of the world, was like an innocent, pure child. However, Subaru, Louis Arneb, you lose. Natsuki Subaru shall not forgive Louis Arneb, who was sobbing like a child. Louis widened her eyes, frozen, upon the verification of defeat that had been slammed right before her. Whilst witnessing fear fill her eyes like ink spilled on a white sheet, Subaru's heart yet remained peaceful like the calm at sea. The world was not filled with problems that could be ignored simply because of not knowing. And the deeds Louis or her siblings had committed were countless inhuman and demonic atrocities. It was not as if she did not get a chance to know. Through the memories of others, she must have also had a chance to come in contact with human emotions, likes and dislikes, and learn from them. However, what she absorbed from there was not something akin to affection for others, but a further dusky, grisly desire, and the conduct of trampling upon and spitting on the effortful lives of others. Perhaps the fault was that of her teachers. Her elder brothers had been bad role models of her life. However, it was her decision to never use any chance to return back from the mistaken path. Subaru, you may know as well if you were a part of me. But the ranks which you all sin archbishops name yourself as is common with the 7 deadly sins. 7 deadly sins is a pretty English term for Chinibu purveyors, but there also exist the 7 heavenly virtues which are something close it. The 7 deadly sins, pride, envy, wrath, gluttony, sloth, lust, greed. And the 7 heavenly virtues, chastity, humility, temperance, patience, diligence, charity, kindness. If the 7 deadly sins were karma impossible to be sundered from humans as long as they live, then these were 7 conventions which mustn't be forgotten in order for humans carrying the burden of those sins to live with others. Because they respect that, humans can live with other humans. Subaru, but, you violated that. That is why, the sin archbishops, Louis Arneb, had become an unforgivable great evil. Louis, eek, eek, eek. The frightened, curled-up Louis was struck with Subaru's words and was shivering as if she had experienced agony. The slightest effort of others, of the world connected to fear. Subaru was also aware of that sensation. Having tasted the otherworldly sensation called return by death, in a situation of not knowing how to surmount the obstacle however much one may die, even the sound of dry leaves swaying in the breeze seemed fatal to life. Because he remembered that feeling akin to the soul being frozen, Subaru closed his eyes. And Subaru, Louis Arneb, you lose. Subaru, so, recognize that and release anything and everything. Once again, Subaru repeated her defeat such that she could hear it herself. On top of that, he pushed a firm demand toward the young girl, who remained silent upon hearing that. The return of Subaru's own memories was due to the chance meeting between Natsuki Subaru, who lost his memories, and Natsuki Subaru of the moment immediately previous to his memories being robbed. Since his advance through the different world was replayed in the books of the dead, he was able to restore his own memories in the form of tracing them back. In the form of re-experiencing the stolen memories by utilizing the books of the dead. And fulfilling the unification of Subaru before and after losing memories, the result was the successful second advent of Natsuki Subaru. As its byproduct, Lewis, who had gotten into Subaru in the form of a witch factor, had been forced out as a foreign substance. However, Subaru had witnessed with his own eyes her self-indulgent treatment of the stolen memories of freely bringing them out and peeling them off. If that was possible, then a method to save the people who had their memories, their names robbed would be. Subaru, if we think of doing it, then we can do anything is what you said, right? Then. From being conceited and bragging about her own abilities, she had even succeeded in a stunt like splitting the witch factor into two. Since she had achieved that, then surely it wasn't impossible for her to cancel out the effects of her own authority. If that alone, could come true, then perhaps it would be possible to recover the people who got their memories and names stolen, to recover Rem. Subaru, then, release all of the people you've eaten up until now. If you do that. Lewis, do that, then what? Subaru articulated powerfully, but Lewis shortly intercepted that voice. Lewis remained on white floor in the posture of pulling her niece towards herself, making her long golden hair spreading out on the floor blanket herself. She was glaring at Subaru through the gaps of her hair. What dwelled in her eyes was the sole unquestionable hue of fear. Lewis, do that, then what? Repeating, Lewis piled up the same question yet again. Subaru had been caught off guard by her retort for a moment, but got a hold of himself immediately after she displayed her stance of conversation. Far better than her not talking due to fear. He must accept the words head-on and fumble around for a compromise plan that could change the situation. Subaru, release the great number of people you have eaten. If the names return, then even the honor of the people who've already died can be restored. The people who are alive can even reunite with their families. If you would do that, then I will let you. Lewis, off the hook, you say? If we do that, then Oni-san will let us off the hook? Off the hook, you say? His words intercepted yet again. Subaru felt daunted. Viewing that reaction of Subaru's, Lewis said ha and opened her mouth bearing sharp fangs. Lewis, that can't be, isn't it? That isn't possible. Energetically lifting her face, Lewis shouted with a blazing glint in her eyes. Her two eyes glaring at Subaru, they immutably remained soaked in fear, twinkling darkly. With those dark twinkles in her eyes, Lewis forcefully rocked her body back and forth. Lewis, it isn't. It really isn't, it isn't after all, it indeed isn't, we're telling you it isn't, as we know it isn't, that's why. Oni-san will not let us off the hook. Absolutely certainly. After all. Lewis, Oni-san, destroys his enemies. Absolutely crushes them until the very end of the end. Without any exception. Completely thoroughly. Closes it with a perfect game. He can do that. Then there's no way he wouldn't do that. There's no point in him not doing that. As if having heard a first-class joke, Lewis ended her silence and let her emotions explode. And to Subaru, Lewis's outbursting form was visible as terribly distant, minute. Lewis's facial expression was disordered, trying to laugh, trying to be angered, trying to be doleful, and baffled by the notation of fear not present in any of those. She was perplexed and was imploring. The gateways of all of Lewis's surging emotions, all directly connected to fear. Regardless of whether they began with delight, rage, or sadness. Knowing that all would ultimately lead to fear, for what should she be delighted, be enraged, be saddened? Even if she were to believe, that conclusion led to fear as well. Subaru was more than sufficiently aware of the ingrained nature of Lewis's rejection. Cursing the entirety of the world, being flung into a storm of suspicion and distrust, becoming trapped in a sensation of being forbid into the slightest movement. That was, the hell named oneself which Natsuki Subaru had also experienced. What pulled Subaru out of that hopeless hell was surely because there had been someone who held his hand, and that warmth never let go of Subaru. That was, the silver-haired young girl who had saved Subaru's life, his heart when he had first arrived in the different world. That was, the dressed young girl who strived to protect Subaru when he had been betrayed by anything and everything. That was, the blue-haired young girl who gently made Subaru realize when he sought to abandon everything. That was, the reason why Natsuki Subaru had remained without being prisoned in hell. That foundation of heart was not possessed by Louis Arneb, who was drowned in fear before his eyes. That is why she did not possess the ability to conquer fear. She could never think of return by death other than being a nightmarish curse of being dragged into an inescapable hell. Though quite a cliched expression, humans cannot live by themselves. That is why, for her to be saved, she, who was caged in fear, it was necessary for someone to extend their hand to her. Someone offering their hand, just as Subaru had been offered once. However, Subaru, I will not save you. Subaru shall not extend his hand to Louis Arneb. Louis, ah. Subaru, I will not save you. Neither will I pity you. Louis Arneb, the sin archbishop of gluttony, the blasphemer of souls standing in the white world. Not matter how sweet in appearance, no matter how miserable and transient in ambience, no matter how luring an attitude of craving being sheltered by adults were she to possess, Subaru shall not forgive her. The sin archbishops had committed sins difficult to forgive. That was the conclusion Natsuki Subaru had derived. Subaru, I'm sure no matter what I say, it'll never prove to be salvation for you in the first place. Louis, eek. Louis's distended eyes were filled with naught but terror toward Subaru. In this place, though only Subaru could understand the fear she bore, the very reason for her fear was Subaru himself. In other words, her labyrinth couldn't possibly be opened up. And upon Subaru's head-on declaration that we won't save her, that he detested her, Louis stabbed her claws into the shapeless white world and whilst desperately distancing herself away from Subaru. Louis, we know Oni-san ploy. We had been Oni-san after all. That's why, we know what Oni-san is going to do. However, we won't let you sue. Subaru, you. Louis, return what was eaten. Absolutely never. After all, this is our lifeline. If we lose this, then Oni-san will be able to kill us. As long as this isn't returned, Oni-san won't kill us. It's the other way around, completely the other way around. In order to not be killed by Oni-san, we cannot return this. That's why you know. Howling with a loud voice, Louis turned her palm towards Subaru. It's not as if something was being fired from the fair palm held out. However, Louis's aim materialized in a different form. Subaru's field of vision steadily distorted into white, a change was yielded in the Hall of Memories. It commenced constricting the world, having detected the presence of a foreign substance and seeking to eliminate it. As a result, Subaru's existence was extracted out. Louis, enough, we don't want to be in the same place as Oni-san for even a second. Impossible in terms of physiology. Impossible in terms of life. Impossible in terms of destiny, you see. That's why, disappear. The ones who will eat Oni-san will be Oni-chan and Nai-sama. Either of them can do however they please. No thanks from our side. Louis's decision, infuriatingly enough, was the best possible option for her. Banishing Subaru from the Hall of Memories and sending him back to reality. And entrusting opposing him to her siblings Lei and Roy instead of herself. If the sin archbishops of gluttony could choose to share or not to share a meal, then Louis would be able to part ways from the worst platter named Natsuki Subaru. Whether her siblings would bear the same anguish as herself or not, that itself was something her current self did not know. Subaru, GH. It was difficult to hold out. With not a single thing to latch onto, and with even the ground to stand firm on becoming vague, Subaru was hopelessly the weaker side in this Hall of Memories. Subaru, if you don't like me doing it, then if you settle this by yourself. Louis, we won't go along with that, Sue. Even if you try to make us kill you, it's futile. You intend to take us to task through a return by death. We won't let you. Oni-chan and Nai-sama will utterly eat away Oni-san. That is the condition for our victory, Sue. Unraveling her fangs, Louis scowled at Subaru, who tried to hold his ground. He could no longer oppose her will. Comprehending that, he let in a deep inhale. Afterwards, Subaru's black eyes directly pierced through Louis. Louis, eek. Subaru, if your siblings are your final rope to rely on, then I understand. I will slash that rope and make you pay. You'd better remember this, Louis Arneb. With a single finger pointed towards the frightened, cowering Louis, he resumed. Subaru, everything distressful, everything painful, bear all of it by yourself. Don't run away from the memories. Humiliation and repentance were all memories necessary to shape the current oneself. Its entirety had become food for the human named Natsuki Subaru, and the Natsuki Subaru constructed by its entirety had reached this point after having stockpiled many a death. If Natsuki Subaru was amazing, then that was because humiliation and repentance let him be so. Subaru, with that being said, I don't really want even a part of that shame. That was what Subaru whispered whilst being expelled out from a space to its edge, which wasn't present in the world, with his field of vision turning white as if nothing had been there. And the Hall of Memories came untied. And, within the Hall of Memories wherein the form of the dreadful lunatic had been erased, Louis Arneb took in a deep, deep shivering inhale, and confirmed her own pure life. Louis, ah. Her throat, shivering, her lungs, shivering, her heart, shivering, her soul, shivering. Even Louis, who had indulged in every possible variety of memories, couldn't comprehend an existence that repulsive. What was truly frightening about that thing was its inconceivable spirit. Louis, why? Whether she could remain as per ordinary, she did not know. Louis had become a part of that thing, and prior to that had eaten that thing's memories thoroughly down to its roots. Slowly crunching the memories without exception, she had masticated them. That deed itself was roundabout, as if peeling off the layers of an onion's skin one by one, a code of action separating that which yielded new life upon each instance of death into greater than 20 sections. Before having experienced return by death, that deed of dividing those memories into several portions, then eating them was something that made her heart pound with the notion of it being a new experience, but now all she found was incomprehensible fear. In the first place, why couldn't the memories prior to the occurrence of the summoning into the different world or whatever be robbed? Originally, the power of the authority of gluttony was supposed to eat away all of the memories of the subject until the moment of birth. Yet, what could be robbed from that thing were merely the memories of this 1 year. As if Od Lagna did not assess the memories previous to that, abhorred them, or otherwise. Listen, isn't this a bit from what was supposed to be? Louis. Suddenly, a voice echoed in the Hall of Memories supposed to have been left alone, and Louis turned around, astonished. However, her doubts were immediately dispelled. The one who stood before Louis's line of sight, who had turned back, was Louis, us. Louis, that's right, us. Because we got the short end of the stick, it's us who had been waiting here in vain. Which one will play the trial version of The Greatest Life by becoming Oni-san? Was the play environment properly arranged? Came here to report that, is it? While saying so, smiling at Louis was the existence exactly the same her Louis. Dividing the witch factor originally supposed to be 1 into 2, having segregated the soul despite being the same personage, in the utmost correct sense, another one of herself. The greatest factor which made that possible must be that Louis did not fear the deterioration of herself, an existence of mere soul devoid of a flesh body. That Louis, who was one more of oneself, did not share that personal experience unlike Louis. That is why Louis found the genuinely smiling form of Louis to be unordinarily distant. Louis? What happened, us? Making such an expression, huh? First of all, what about Oni-san? Being here means, got into this place by reading the Book of the Dead again, no? Louis. Besides, what's with this being all crouched since earlier? Why be so curled up? Hey, the goal was properly accomplished, right? Though we failed on this end, we were supposed to have fulfilled the role, isn't it? Amazing, got in pretty cleanly, huh? Oni-san geez, didn't take notice at all. Of the US inside of himself. Clasping her hands energetically, Louis reminisced the forbidden tryst. Of course, unneeding of a necessity to mention it, Louis was aware of that affair. It referred to back when the Hall of Memories got connected to when thinking of investigating the way of capturing the atrocious swordsman, Redistria. Louis then once again came in contact with that thing, which had forgotten anything and everything, and had the circumstances permitted, intended to eat that thing including Louis, who was a witch factor. Though it was an experiment to see if that thing's authority, including the integrated witch factor, could possibly be successfully plundered by doing that, it failed due to an unexpected hindrance. She surely never mused having to taste a counterattack by one of the eaten memories. However, reflecting on it now, had the hindrance not entered there, then Louis might have become one with that thing by this time. With that thing? Louis, hey, what happened, us? Talk about various more stuff, let us hear it. Saw it, right? Heard it, right? Scented it, right? Touched it, right? Tasted it, right? Natsuki Subaru's authority, eh? Louis, Dante mentioned that thing's name. Louis, Sue. Resuming her merry words, Louis stretched her hand. The moment that arm attempted to touch her own shoulder, Louis shook off the arm in accompaniment of exasperation. Violently, powerfully, with as much rejection as possible, she did, to the arm of her literal other half. Louis, huh? Naturally, unbeknownst to the meaning behind her other half's action, bafflement was yielded forth in Louis' facial expression. However, Louis did not possess the leeway to look back onto that expression of Louis. Louis hugged the shoulder others had tried touching, and stepped backwards whilst shaking her head in rejection. Louis, no. Non, oh no. Don't touch. Don't come near. She was astonished by her own cognizance. However, it was her own sensation. It would not turn traitor like the hell named Oneself. She comprehended. Louis before her eyes, who possessed the same face as herself, who had undergone the same experiences as herself. The existence supposed to understand her soul at present, it was someone other for Louis. It was unknown what others will do. They will not protect Louis. They could become Louis's cause of death. Baleful enemies who would not but kill Louis, who did not want to die. Louis, don't come. Don't come near, don't come near, don't come near, don't come near, Sue. Don't come close. Don't touch us. Louis. Hugging her own body, she was unable to do anything but react in exactly the same way as when she had confronted that thing. For Louis, who had continued molding herself through the memories of others in this space devoid of the freedom to even look at a mirror, the sense of foreignty she felt towards Louis, who possessed the same face as herself, was stronger than the unskillful others. Witnessing Louis repeat denial and rejection like this, Louis reciprocatively shifted her gaze along with the hand that had been shaken off. And Louis, huh? What's with that? Pertaining to Louis's rejective response, Louis clenched her hand that had been shaken off. She then looked down onto Louis with a terribly thirstful voice, biting and clanking her fangs. Louis, what's with that? What's with that? What's with that? What does this mean? With what purpose? With what idea? With what plan? With what thought? Hey! Louis, eeked Sue. Louis, this is different from what was supposed to be Sue. What happened, thus? What's with that reaction? Attitude. Response. The rejected Louis enraged, closing in towards the huddled Louis. Crouching down before Louis, who knelt her throat upon the vigor, Louis grasped the hair of her cowering other half. Subsequently making her raise her face through sheer force, the two with the same faces glared into each other at a distance that their breaths entangled. Louis, it sure is strange. Strange, how strange, isn't it strange, pretty strange, it is strange, as it's strange, quite strange, as it's too strange, as we're saying it's strange. Louis. Louis, what about the strategy? The plan went well, didn't it? The plan was to become a factor and get inside Oneself and put wickedness to work, wasn't it? It was a job really well done. Oneself was frightened, after all. Oneself completely thought that Natsuki Subaru was the closest person to him. Louis made no response to the plan which Louis recited and its progress. The truth was, Louis' plans had transitioned smoothly. Louis experienced return by death inside Subaru and stimulated the separation of Subaru and Natsuki Subaru by putting wickedness to work. And while staying behind in the Hall of Memories, Louis shall eat Subaru, who had differentiated himself from Natsuki Subaru, and make the authority her own belonging. A single step had remained. And even if that had not went well, Louis, no matter how many times, tens of times, hundreds of times. The arrangement was to challenge until the authority of return by death has been looted, isn't it? What's wrong after failing a bit? It'll be fine by stealing Oneself's memories again and trying again no matter how many times it takes. Let's mutually exchange roles and challenge, no matter how many times it takes. Failures can be recovered from. The one to assimilate as a witch factor, and the one to stand by in the Hall of Memories, she had intended to accomplish the complete extortion of the authority by exchanging roles, and regardless how many times it would take, without getting tired of it. And yet, Louis, to do something like rejecting us, what happened, huh? Louis, knew it Sue. Louis, With strength poured into the arm which had grasped her hair, Louis gave rise to a screech in agony and fear. Afterwards she shoved the chest of Louis, who was before her eyes, making her other half rumble in pain and fall onto her back. Mutually glaring at each other with eyes of disbelief, a painful silence fell upon the white world. And, whilst Louis remained silent, Louis widened her eyes and... Louis, it can't be. Aiming to monopolize the authority? Louis, since the authority of return by death was obtained successfully, erasing Oneself immediately and aiming to enjoy it by oneself? Leaving us as is, too. Louis, that's wrong, Sue. Louis bellowed before the frozen Louis, who had painted a picture of repulsive misgivings in astonishment, in shock. That was not true at all. It was improbable. She had not thought in the slightest bit to monopolize this. Something like this, if it was possible to throw it away, then she wished to throw it away. However, she could not do so. For these were the memories of nobody but Louis Arneb. Oneself's own memories were impossible to be erased. Impossible to be stolen. Impossible to be taken in and out. Everything distressful, everything painful, bear all of it by yourself. Dante run away from the memories. Lewis, eek. So she had been told by that thing just previously. What was experienced by oneself, what path was walked by oneself, could not be erased. Having certainly taken birth within Lewis, that was the history of Lewis Arneb herself. Lewis, this is no joke too. Something like this, as if it can be excused. She had wanted to become happy. She had wanted to attain a joyful life that was hers alone. However, the life solely belonging to her which she had attained in an unexpected form smashed Lewis's heart into pieces, and wounded her to an irrecoverable extent. Lewis was unable to comprehend, Lewis fearing the wounds and abrasion of her heart. Lewis, as if we'll let someone like you monopolize our means to become happy. Lewis, that's wrong. That's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. That's not it. That is not it. That's definitely not it. Lewis, as if we can believe that. We never thought that we'd be betrayed by us. As expected of us, isn't it, us? That's right. We get it, we get it. HM, we do get it. Lewis, no. Don't get it at all. Don't get it at all. Don't get our feelings at all, Sue. Lewis, no, do get it indeed. After all, it is about us. That's right. If it's for the sake of becoming happy, then we'd be willing to do anything, and must do anything. Joyfulness is something which keeps on declining by the slightest thing. Lewis bounced and joined her hands before her slim chest. And with a magnificent, broad smile, she directed a sidelong glance towards Lewis, who articulated her rejection in a tearful voice. Lewis, what if we carelessly schemed wickedness? If that's done to us by us, who have attained return by death, then no matter how much the struggle we can never win, isn't it? Amazing. Really put thought into it, isn't it? Lewis, don't want to die. We don't want to die. Don't want to die, don't want to die, don't want to die. Lewis, don't say such utterly obvious lies. Don't want to die? Why? How come? If it's unneeded, then hand it over to us. What a filthy desire to monopolize. Can't even think that it's us? Lewis. From Lewis' words, she was repudiated being the same existence. At that instant, Lewis felt like she heard the note of something inside of her thirsting, cracking, shattering. She did know what had been present inside of her which shattered. Though she did not know. Lewis, Natsuki Subaru belongs to us. This thieving cat. Despite not knowing what that thing was whatsoever, it was condescendingly called as a belonging. Even though the only one who truly comprehended what thing was only herself, how arbitrary a thing to say. The only one who truly comprehended that thing was herself alone. Lewis, the only one who understands Natsuki Subaru is us. This foolish girl. That thing was fearsome. That thing was repulsive. That thing was abhorrent. That is why. Lewis, let us taste it, Tutsu. Lewis pounced, advancing in order to purloin the memories which made Lewis, Lewis. To hand that over, would resort to give the meaning of it being the death of Lewis Arneb. Giving the meaning of death. Giving the meaning of the world witnessed by that thing. Lewis, Aotsu. Screamed. Screamed. Screaming, 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 she screamed. Continuing to scream, whilst resuming screaming, whilst continuing to raise a screaming voice. Dante want to die. An exceedingly fierce, meaningless conflict commenced in the Hall of Memories. A conflict with nobody watching, nobody interested. Commenced and ended. A conflict, devoid of victors. Ice brand arts. The instant those words were fired, she tightly gripped a sensation born within her palm and swung it completely. What had been generated in her hands was a long sword shaped with ice, and its cutting ability was far greater than that of some incomplete iron sword. Though she had only just begun practicing the sword, moving her body was her specialty. Swinging the ice sword atop the extended line, she attempted to land a fatal blow upon her opponent while sealing off his routes to escape. However, ha. You're doing it. But this is too far from being enough to land, geez. Huck. The enemy, with his long hair waving about, evaded her fatal strike by seemingly crawling on the ground. Glaring with his sharp cuspids unraveled, was the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony, who named himself as Labaton Catos. Upon hearing the name of Sin Archbishop, something akin to dislike swelled up within her. That was because approximately a month ago, clashing with a great number of Sin archbishops in the Watergate City Priestella had led to a large number of settlements, as well as a large number of settlements being delayed, at any rate, led to mountain worth of grave happenings. Plentiful emotions of sadness or bitterness had been borne forth. Their elimination or solution had yet not been achieved, that is why everyone was doing their best, and yet. Why do you all act like this and? Lay, why? Why indeed? Why we wonder? Why is it why? Why must it be why we wonder? Why is it what we certainly wonder? Why must what be why? Why is what why is why. His teasing words possessed no echo of seriousness. Her opponent did not intend to give a proper response. Sensing that, she powerfully stiffened her cheeks. Being able to converse would be the best. However, should the opponent not comply with conversation, then she shall not hesitate any further. That resolute exchange certainly occurred with clarity during that moment. Icicle line. Lay, wow. Accompanying the chant, a sound of freezing space echoed from her rear. Countless ice stakes with sharp tips were borne in the air, signifying they were ready to be fired. Gazing at that, Lay's composure, yet, remained unchanged. With no strong feelings for that, she merely commenced the offensive, abiding by her frozen fighting spirit. The count of the fired ice stakes was close to, but no greater than, 100. Submerging the aisle seemingly constructed of stone, the dust of the ice which had impacted the floor, the walls, the ceiling fluttered about, and the space frozen white brought immense damage upon the one who had been immensely hit. However, Lay, sorry, One-san. We're tired of seeing that. Is something we won't say, but we have seen it. See, because we are genius after all, we don't think an attack that has already been seen once will hit. Swinging the daggers fastened to both of his hands, Lay laughed, having outdone the terrific attack of ice. She inhaled in astonishment, witnessing his talent and skill, and having withstood and outdone it as a matter of fact, as he stood completely unwounded. However, if he had outdone it once, then twice, thrice, if that still won't work, then even more. Lay, you're thinking you'll be able to win if you do it 100 times? It will not reach through even after you do it 1,000 times, you know? Then I'll just do it 10,000 times. I won't let you go where everyone is. Lay, ahahatsu, well that sure is a large scale. Good gracious, how outrageous. Putting his hand on his forehead, Lay let out a sigh divided into disgust and irritation. Whilst viewing that, she quietly abided by her own words. Though she had pronounced those words whilst simply going with the flow, she must abide by them. Thus, the moment she attempted to step ahead and fulfill that. Lay batten Kato's. From the rear echoed a voice in the aisle that was neither hers nor Lay's, leading her to thoughtlessly halt her feet. Upon looking back after being immediately lured by the voice, a shadow showed itself by the corner of the path and leapt into her field of her vision. That was a black-haired youth with a somewhat nasty look of eyes. He rushed into the battlefield with a gallant expression, and was looking at Lay and herself, who were sparring in the aisle. Ah! Suddenly, oh no was the thought which surfaced in her innermost mind. Though she must say something, a vacuum was born in her words. This was due to the various emotions which overflowed in face of the rushing youth. However, before bafflement was yielded in front of the youth, she hurriedly moved her lips. It's dangerous, so wait. You may not know about me, but he is the enemy. Leave this place to me. Even though you may not know about me. She wished for him to leave this place, and for him to not think of herself much. At the very least, right now, at the present instant, should she begin considering things aside from fighting, she would certainly burst into tears and cry. She did not wish to show her weak side like this and trouble everyone. And yet... It's all right, Emilia-tan. The youth who had rushed in called her name. Emotions she could not concern herself with, like anxiety, like sorrow, strummed and sprang within her chest due to simply that, for which she tried her best to make sure they did flow out. After all, Subaru, my name is Natsuki Subaru. Emilia-tan's one and only knight. Right now, Emilia's heart was beating with such warmth, such warmth. End of chapters 75 and 76, Louis Arneb.